Mason, an ordinary man caught up in a world of deceit and corruption, never expected that a late-night stroll would change his life forever. When he stumbles upon a scruffy dog digging near an abandoned construction site, little does he know that the dog's mysterious actions will lead him to a buried secret that's been hidden for decades. What he uncovers beneath the dirt sets off a chain of events that puts him in the crosshairs of a dangerous criminal empire, one tied to powerful figures and dark family secrets. With the dog by his side, Finn is thrust into a race against time to expose the truth before it's buried once again, risking everything in the process. The evening air was cool, the kind that hinted at the first signs of fall. Mason walked down the familiar streets of his neighborhood, hands stuffed into the pockets of his jacket. The soft hum of streetlights and the occasional buzz of a passing car filled the quiet night. It was his favorite time of day, calm, uneventful, and just what he needed after a long day. But as he approached the old construction site near the edge of town, something unusual caught his eye. A scruffy dog, small but sturdy, was furiously digging in a patch of dirt near the site's perimeter. Its wiry fur was streaked with mud, and its movements were frantic, as though it was on a mission. Finn slowed his steps, curiosity pulling him closer. "Hey there, buddy," he called softly, keeping his tone calm so as not to scare the dog. The dog froze, its head snapping up. Sharp, intelligent eyes met Finn's, and for a moment neither moved. Finn could see the tension in the dog's body, its ears perked and tail stiff. But instead of running, the dog stayed put, studying him. Finn crouched down a few feet away, holding out a hand. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "What's got you so worked up?" The dog gave a soft growl, not aggressive, but more of a warning. Then, as if deciding Finn wasn't a threat, it turned back to its digging, dirt flying behind it in little bursts. Finn watched for a moment before stepping closer. The dog didn't seem to mind him now, too focused on its task. He knelt in the dirt beside it, noticing the glint of something metallic beneath the soil. "What are you after?" he murmured, brushing some of the dirt away with his hands. The dog barked once, sharply as if to say, "Keep going." Finn's fingers scraped against cold metal. He pushed more dirt aside, revealing the edge of a rusted box. The strange markings on its surface immediately caught his attention. They were faint but intricate, like symbols or letters from a language he didn't recognize. "Well, this is definitely something," Finn said, glancing at the dog. The dog barked again, wagging its tail this time. It looked at Finn expectantly, as though urging him to do something with the box. Finn tried to lift it, but it was heavier than it looked. Grunting, he managed to pull it free from the dirt. The box was old, its hinges rusted and the lock firmly in place. "What's in here?" Finn muttered. He turned the box over in his hands, inspecting it closely. The dog sat down, panting lightly as it watched him. Just as Finn was about to stand, the distant rumble of an engine broke the silence. He looked up to see headlights sweeping across the road nearby. A dark car sped past, its tires kicking up gravel as it disappeared into the night. The dog growled low, its body tense. Finn frowned, glancing between the dog and the road. "What's got you so spooked?" he asked. The car was long gone, but the unease lingered. Finn shook his head and stood, brushing dirt off his jeans. "All right, let's get out of here," he said, tucking the box under his arm. He looked down at the dog. "You coming?" The dog barked once and trotted after him, its steps quick and purposeful. Finn's house was a modest two-story with warm, inviting light spilling from the windows. He unlocked the door and stepped inside, setting the box on the kitchen counter. The dog followed him in, its nose immediately sniffing the air. "Make yourself at home, I guess," Finn said with a chuckle. He opened the fridge and pulled out some leftover chicken. Placing it in a bowl, he set it on the floor. The dog approached cautiously, sniffed the food, and then dug in. Finn turned his attention back to the box. It was covered in dirt, its rusted edges jagged and worn. He traced the strange markings with his fingers, trying to make sense of them. "What are you hiding?" he murmured, reaching for a damp cloth to wipe it down. The dog finished its meal and jumped onto a nearby chair, watching Finn intently. Finn tried to open the box, but the lock wouldn't budge. He grabbed a toolbox from under the sink, pulling out a hammer and screwdriver. "This might take a while," he muttered. The dog tilted its head, its sharp eyes following his every move. Finn worked on the lock for several minutes, tapping and prying at it until he heard a satisfying click. The lock fell away, and the lid creaked open. Inside was a stack of papers tied with twine, a faded photograph, and a small, ornate key. "What is this?" Finn said softly, pulling out the photograph. The photograph was old, its edges frayed, It showed a group of men standing in front of a building. One man was circled in red ink, his stern face and sharp suit standing out from the rest. Finn set the photo aside and untied the stack of papers. Most were faded, the writing barely legible, but a few words caught his eye: Hargrove, Ledger, and Hidden. The key was the final item. It was small but intricately designed, its tarnished surface catching the light. The dog barked suddenly, startling Finn. It jumped off the chair and nudged the photograph with its nose. "You know something I don't?" Finn asked, watching the dog. The dog barked again, its tail wagging. Finn grabbed his phone and snapped a picture of the photograph. He opened a search engine and typed in the description of the building, hoping for a match. After a few minutes, he found it. The building in the photo was an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. "Well, looks like we have somewhere to go," Finn said, grabbing his coat. The dog barked, trotting to the door as if ready to lead the way. The quiet of the night wrapped around Finn's home, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. Finn stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the old rusted box he had just pried out of the dirt at the construction site. It was heavier than it looked, with strange markings carved into its surface. The dog, scruffy, mud-streaked, and sharp-eyed, sat nearby, its gaze fixed on the box. It didn't move, except for the occasional twitch of its ears. "All right," Finn muttered, rolling up his sleeves. "Let's see what you're hiding." Finn tried pulling the lid open with his hands, but the lock didn't budge. He reached under the sink, pulling out a toolbox. The dog, curious, padded closer and sniffed at the box. "You're invested in this, huh?" Finn said, glancing at the dog. The dog barked softly, wagging its tail once before sitting back down. Finn grabbed the hammer and screwdriver, carefully working at the rusted lock. It creaked and groaned under the pressure, refusing to give way. Beads of sweat formed on Finn's brow as he tried again, this time striking the lock harder. Finally, with a loud click, the lock broke apart and the lid creaked open. Finn stepped back, wiping his hands on his jeans. "There we go," he said, a note of triumph in his voice. As the lid lifted, a musty smell wafted out, the unmistakable scent of something long buried. Inside, Finn found a bundle of papers tied with twine, a faded photograph, and a small, ornate key. Carefully, he picked up the photograph. It was old, the edges frayed and yellowed with age. It showed a group of men standing in front of a large building. One man was circled in red ink, his expression stern and his suit immaculate. "Who are you?" Finn murmured, studying the face. Next, he untied the stack of papers. Most were faded, the writing barely legible, but a few words stood out: Hargrove, Ledger, and Hidden. Finn frowned, setting the papers aside. The last item was the small key. It was intricately designed, its tarnished surface gleaming under the kitchen light. "What were you hiding, Hargrove?" Finn whispered, turning the key over in his hands. The dog barked suddenly, jolting Finn out of his thoughts. It jumped onto a chair and leaned toward the counter, its nose sniffing the photograph. "You're really into this," Finn said, setting the key down. The dog pawed the photo, barking again. All right," Finn said, holding the photo closer. The building in the background caught his attention. It was tall and industrial, with large windows and a distinctive smokestack. Finn grabbed his phone and snapped a picture of the photograph. Using a search engine, he began typing a description of the building: large factory, old smokestack, abandoned. After a few minutes of scrolling, he found a match. The building in the photograph was an abandoned factory on the outskirts of town. It had been shut down decades ago after a fire, but rumors suggested it was once used for less than legal activities. Finn leaned back, staring at the screen. "So that's where you came from," he said, glancing at the dog. The dog barked again, wagging its tail. Finn grabbed his coat and the key, tucking the photograph into his pocket. "Let's check it out," he said. The dog trotted to the door, its steps quick and purposeful. The road to the factory was dark, lined with trees that swayed gently in the night breeze. Finn drove in silence, his mind racing with questions. Who was Hargrove? Why was the box buried? And why did this dog seem so intent on leading him to these answers? The dog sat in the passenger seat, its head out the window, ears flapping in the wind. Occasionally, it glanced at Finn, as if to make sure he was still focused. "We'll get there," Finn said, half to himself, half to the dog. The factory loomed in the distance, its silhouette stark against the night sky. The building was massive, with broken windows and walls streaked with soot. The smokestack still stood tall, a grim reminder of its past. Finn parked a few blocks away, not wanting to draw attention. He stepped out of the car, the cool air sharp against his skin. The dog jumped out after him, sniffing the ground and wagging its tail. "Stay close," Finn said, pulling out a flashlight. They approached the factory cautiously, the dog leading the way. The air was thick with the scent of decay and rust, and every step echoed in the quiet night. Finn found a side entrance, the door slightly ajar. He pushed it open, the hinges groaning in protest. Inside, the factory was a maze of rusted machinery, broken glass, and debris. The dog sniffed the air, its body tense. It trotted ahead, its nose to the ground, stopping near a pile of old crates. "What is it?" Finn whispered, shining his flashlight over the area. Behind the crates, he spotted a small compartment built into the wall. It was barely visible, hidden under layers of grime and dust. Finn knelt down, brushing the dirt away. The compartment had a keyhole, one that matched the ornate key he had found in the box. "No way," he muttered, pulling the key from his pocket. The key fit perfectly. Finn turned it slowly, feeling the mechanism click into place. As he opened the compartment, the dog barked sharply, its eyes fixed on the doorway behind them. Finn froze, his hand still on the key. Footsteps echoed in the distance, growing louder with each passing second. Someone else was here. Finn pressed his back against the cold, rusted wall of the factory, his breath coming in shallow, steady draws. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed louder, reverberating through the empty space. The scruffy dog beside him was tense, its body low to the ground, a soft growl rumbling in its throat. Finn glanced down at the small compartment he had just unlocked. The door was slightly ajar, revealing a stack of faded envelopes tied with fraying twine. He wanted to grab them and leave, but the growing sound of footsteps rooted him in place. "Stay quiet," he whispered, looking at the dog. The footsteps stopped just a few feet away. Finn peeked around the corner and saw a figure standing near the center of the factory floor. The man wore a dark jacket and a cap pulled low over his face. He scanned the room, holding a flashlight that swept across the rusted machinery and shattered glass. Finn's heart pounded. He crouched lower, inching back toward the compartment. The dog stayed by his side, its eyes locked on the man. The figure muttered something under his breath and moved further into the factory. Finn used the moment to reach into the compartment and pull out the envelopes. They felt brittle, as though they might crumble in his hands. The man suddenly turned, his flashlight sweeping dangerously close to their hiding spot. Finn froze, pressing himself against the wall. The dog mirrored his movements, staying perfectly still. The man's footsteps moved away, fading into the distance. Finn let out a quiet sigh of relief. "Come on," he whispered to the dog. The two moved quickly toward the exit, keeping low and quiet. The dog led the way, sniffing the air and pausing every few steps to listen. As they reached the side door, Finn pushed it open just enough to slip through. Outside, the cool night air felt like a blessing. Finn quickly made his way back to his car, the dog trotting close behind. He opened the door, and the dog jumped into the passenger seat without hesitation. Finn didn't start the car right away. He set the envelopes on the dashboard, his hands still trembling. "Who was that?" he muttered, glancing back at the factory. The dog barked softly, as if to say, "It doesn't matter. Let's go." Once home, Finn placed the envelopes and the rest of the items from the box on the kitchen table. The dog settled on the floor, its head resting on its paws, but its eyes watching Finn closely. Finn untied the twine around the first envelope, carefully pulling out its contents. Inside was a faded map with several locations circled in red ink. One of the locations was the factory he had just visited. Another was labeled simply Depot. "What's this all about?" Finn murmured, studying the map. The next envelope contained handwritten letters, though much of the text was smudged or faded. One sentence stood out clearly. "The ledger is the key. Protect it at all costs." "The ledger?" Finn repeated, frowning. He looked at the dog. "What do you think? Is this about Hargrove's treasure?" The dog didn't respond, of course, but its sharp gaze seemed almost knowing. Finn spent the next hour researching the other locations on the map. The one marked Depot turned out to be an old train station on the outskirts of town, long abandoned and rumored to be a site for illegal activity during Hargrove's time. "This has to be it," Finn said, tapping the map. He glanced at the dog, who was now standing by the door, its tail wagging slightly. "You're always ready, huh?" Finn chuckled. He grabbed his coat and the map. "Let's see what we find at the depot." The drive to the depot was quiet, the streets empty, and the moon casting a soft glow over the landscape. Finn parked a short distance away, not wanting to draw attention. The depot loomed ahead, its silhouette dark and foreboding against the night sky. Finn and the dog approached cautiously. The building was in worse shape than the factory, its walls crumbling and the windows shattered. Graffiti covered the exterior, and the air smelled of damp wood and rust. Finn shone his flashlight through the open door. The interior was a mess of broken benches, fallen beams, and debris scattered across the floor. The dog trotted ahead, its nose to the ground. It stopped near a pile of debris, barking softly. "What is it, boy?" Finn whispered, kneeling beside the pile. Finn began moving the debris aside, revealing a metal grate in the floor. It was bolted shut, but the bolts were old and rusted. With some effort, Finn managed to pry it open, revealing a narrow ladder leading down into the darkness. "This just keeps getting better," he muttered, shining his flashlight down the hole. The dog barked once, wagging its tail as if encouraging him. Finn climbed down carefully, the ladder creaking under his weight. At the bottom, he found himself in a small, hidden room. The walls were lined with wooden crates, many of them stamped with the name Hargrove Industries. Finn opened one of the crates, finding it filled with old ledgers and documents. He picked up one of the books, flipping through its pages. The entries detailed shipments, payments, and names, evidence of a massive smuggling operation. "This is it," Finn said softly. Before Finn could examine the ledgers further, he heard movement above him. The sound of footsteps echoed faintly, followed by a low, familiar voice. The man from the factory had followed him. Finn quickly stuffed the ledger into his bag and motioned for the dog to stay quiet. The two climbed back up the ladder as quietly as they could, slipping out of the depot just as the man entered the room. Finn and the dog ran through the night, the sound of the man's shouts fading into the distance. As they reached the car, Finn leaned against the door, catching his breath. "This is getting dangerous," he said, looking at the dog. The dog barked once, its tail wagging as if to say, "We're not done yet." The next morning, Finn sat at his kitchen table, the ledger and the map spread out before him. The dog, whom he had started calling Scout, sat by his feet, tail occasionally thumping against the floor. Finn flipped through the pages of the ledger again, trying to make sense of the numbers and names listed in neat, faded handwriting. The entries described transactions, smuggled goods, and payments, but some details were in code. "This isn't just smuggling," Finn murmured. "This is bigger." Scout barked softly, nudging Finn's leg. Finn chuckled. "Yeah, I know. We're in deep." As he studied the map again, a name caught his eye, Ryan Hargrove. A knock at the door startled Finn. He glanced at Scout, who stood up immediately, his body tense. Finn walked to the door cautiously, peering through the peephole. A woman stood on the porch, dressed in a long coat with her hands stuffed into the pockets. She looked up, and Finn caught her sharp, searching gaze. He opened the door slightly. "Can I help you?" The woman didn't flinch. "My name's Ryan," she said. "Ryan Hargrove. I think you have something that belongs to me." Finn's grip on the door tightened. "What makes you think that?" "Because you're the one who dug up the box at the construction site," she replied smoothly. "And the ledger inside? It's part of my family's history." Finn stepped outside, closing the door behind him. "If this is your family's history, why was it buried?" Ryan raised an eyebrow. "That's what I'm trying to figure out. Look, I'm not here to fight you. I just want to know what you found." Finn studied her for a moment. There was something guarded in her expression, but also a determination that mirrored his own. "Fine," he said, "but we talk out here." Ryan crossed her arms. "Fair enough. What do you know about Hargrove Industries?" Finn hesitated. "Not much, just that they were involved in smuggling decades ago." "It was more than smuggling," Ryan said. "My great-grandfather, Richard Hargrove, ran one of the largest underground networks in the country." "The ledger you found." "It could expose everything he did, and everyone he worked with." Finn frowned. "Why do you care about exposing it?" Ryan looked away briefly, her jaw tightening. "Let's just say I have my reasons." Finn considered her words. He didn't trust her entirely, but her knowledge of Hargrove Industries could be valuable. "All right," he said, "you can help me figure this out, but if you're hiding something, I'll know." Ryan smirked. "Fair enough." She glanced at the dog, who was watching her intently. "Is he part of the deal?" Finn smiled. "He's the one who started this whole thing." Back inside, Ryan studied the map and ledger. "This depot you visited," she said, pointing to one of the circled locations. "Did you find anything there?" "Ledgers and documents," Finn replied. "Enough to show how big the operation was, but some of it's coded." Ryan nodded. "That's typical. Richard didn't trust anyone, not even his own men. He kept the key to the code in a different location, always moving it." Finn raised an eyebrow. "How do you know that?" Ryan hesitated. "It's family history." Finn didn't press her further, but her evasive answer planted a seed of doubt. As they pored over the documents, Scout barked suddenly, running to the window. Finn and Ryan followed, peering outside. A dark car was parked across the street, its engine idling. Finn recognized it immediately. It was the same car from the construction site. "Someone's watching us," Finn said, his voice low. Ryan's expression darkened. "Lily," she muttered. "Who?" "He's a treasure hunter. And he's dangerous. If he knows you have the ledger, he won't stop until he gets it." Finn felt a chill run down his spine. Why does he care so much? "Because the ledger isn't just about smuggling," Ryan said. "It's about power. Whoever controls the information in that ledger controls a lot of leverage." The car door opened, and a man stepped out. He was tall and broad-shouldered, his movements deliberate as he scanned the street. "We need to go," Ryan said urgently. Finn grabbed the ledger and the maps, stuffing them into his bag. "What about him?" "We'll deal with him later," Ryan said. "Right now, we need to stay ahead of him." Finn, Ryan, and Scout slipped out the back door, moving quickly through the alley behind the house. They heard footsteps approaching the front door as they disappeared into the shadows. Once they were safely away, Ryan turned to Finn. "We need to find the next location on the map. The ledger won't mean anything without the rest of the clues." Finn nodded. "The next spot is marked Mansion. Do you know what that could mean?" Ryan's expression hardened. "I do. It's an old Hargrove property. But it's not just a mansion. It's where Richard kept his most valuable secrets." Finn glanced at Scout, who wagged his tail. "Looks like we got our next stop." The road to the Hargrove mansion was long and winding, lined with tall oaks that swayed gently in the evening breeze. Finn gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes flicking between the road and the rearview mirror. Ryan sat beside him, silent but tense, while Scout lay in the back seat, his ears twitching at every sound. "You think Lally will follow us?" Finn asked, breaking the silence. "He will," Ryan replied flatly. "But the mansion isn't easy to find. It's tucked away, and most people don't even know it exists anymore." Finn frowned. "And you're sure we'll find something there?" "If Richard kept anything important, it would be there," Ryan said. "But the place hasn't been touched in decades. Don't expect it to be welcoming." The mansion appeared suddenly, emerging from the thick woods like a ghost. Its towering facade was cracked and weathered, with ivy climbing up the stone walls. The windows were dark, and the once grand front door hung slightly ajar, creaking softly in the wind. "This is it?" Finn asked, stepping out of the car. Ryan nodded, her expression unreadable. Scout jumped out and immediately began sniffing the ground, his tail wagging cautiously. "Stay close," Finn said, grabbing his flashlight. The trio moved cautiously through the overgrown yard. The grass was knee-high, and the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood. Scout stopped suddenly, growling low. Finn aimed his flashlight in the direction Scout was staring, but he saw nothing except shadows. "What is it?" Finn whispered. Rand stepped closer, her eyes scanning the area. "This place has a way of making you feel washed. Let's just get inside." The front door creaked loudly as Finn pushed it open. The interior was even more decayed than the outside. Dust covered every surface, and cobwebs draped from the ceilings. Broken furniture lay scattered across the floor, and the faint smell of mildew hung in the air. Rand pointed to a grand staircase that led to the upper floors. Richard's study was upstairs. "If there's anything here, it'll be there." Finn nodded and followed her up the creaking stairs, with Scout close behind. The study was surprisingly intact compared to the rest of the house. Shelves lined with dusty books covered the walls, and a large oak desk sat in the center of the room. Rand went straight to the desk, opening drawers and rifling through papers. Finn examined the shelves, his fingers brushing over the spines of old ledgers and journals. "Anything?" he asked. "Not yet," Ryan replied. She pulled out a small box from the desk and opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and a key. "What's that?" Finn asked, stepping closer. Ryan unfolded the paper, her eyes scanning the text. "It's a set of coordinates," she said. "And this key, it's labeled Vault." Finn frowned. "A vault? Where?" Ryan held up the paper. "The coordinates will tell us." Scout barked suddenly, his growl echoing through the study. Finn turned toward the door, his flashlight sweeping across the hallway. Footsteps. "Lily," Ryan whispered, her voice tense. Finn grabbed the key and the paper from Ryan. "We need to go. Now." They moved quickly but quietly, heading back down the stairs. Scout led the way, his nose to the ground, guiding them toward a side exit. Just as they reached the door, a voice rang out behind them. Leaving so soon? Finn turned to see Lily standing at the bottom of the staircase, a smirk on his face and a gun in his hand. Hand over the ledger, Lily said, stepping closer. Finn kept his voice steady. You don't want to do this. Oh, I think I do, Lily replied. You have no idea what you're messing with, Evans. That ledger is worth more than you can imagine. Ryan stepped forward, her expression defiant. This isn't just about money. That ledger could destroy lives. Lily laughed coldly. You think I care about that? Now hand it over, or... Before he could finish, Scout lunged forward, barking loudly. Lily stumbled back, caught off guard, and Finn took the opportunity to grab Ryan's arm and bolt through the side door. They ran through the overgrown yard, Scout leading the way. Lily's shouts echoed behind them, followed by the sharp crack of a gunshot. Keep running? Finn yelled, his heart pounding. They reached the car, and Finn fumbled with the keys, finally unlocking the doors. Ryan and Scout jumped in, and Finn slammed the door shut just as another shot rang out. The car roared to life, and Finn sped down the dirt road, leaving the mansion and Lily behind. Back on the main road, Finn glanced at Ryan. What do those coordinates lead to? Ryan unfolded the paper, her hands trembling slightly. An old storage facility. It's marked as one of Richard's key sites. Finn nodded, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Then that's where we're going next. Scout barked softly from the back seat, as if to say he was ready for whatever came next. Hang on, boy, Finn muttered. This isn't over yet. The drive to the storage facility was tense and quiet. The coordinates Ryan had provided led them to the outskirts of town, where the streets became narrower and the buildings fewer. Finn gripped the steering wheel tightly, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, watching for any sign of Lily. Scout sat in the back seat, his ears perked and his eyes alert. Ryan studied the map and papers they had recovered, her brow furrowed in concentration. This place, it's one of Richard's main hubs, she said finally. He used it to store items too valuable to keep in the mansion. Finn nodded. Anything we should expect? Ryan hesitated. Richard was paranoid. If there's still anything inside, it might not be easy to get to. The storage facility loomed ahead, its towering gates covered in rust and graffiti. It looked abandoned, but the thick padlock on the entrance suggested otherwise. Finn parked a short distance away, stepping out into the cool night air. Scout jumped out after him, sniffing the ground and wagging his tail cautiously. This place looks like a horror movie set, Finn muttered, shining his flashlight over the gates. Ryan joined him, her gaze scanning the area. Let's hope it's just as deserted as it looks. The lock on the gate was old but sturdy. Finn rummaged through his bag, pulling out a small pry bar. This might take a minute, he said, glancing at Ryan. She kept watch while Finn worked on the lock, her eyes darting to the shadows around them. Scout sat at her feet, growling softly every so often. With a loud snap, the lock broke and the chain fell to the ground. Finn pushed the gate open, its hinges squealing loudly in the still night. Subtle, Ryan said dryly. Let's just get inside, Finn replied. Inside the facility, rows of metal storage units stretched into the darkness. Most were covered in dust and rust, their locks either broken or hanging loosely. Scout trotted ahead, his nose to the ground, sniffing each unit as they passed. Which one are we looking for? Finn asked. Ryan held up the paper with the coordinates. Unit 47. They moved deeper into the facility until they found the unit. Unlike the others, this one was in pristine condition, its lock shiny and new. This has to be it, Finn said, stepping closer. Ryan nodded. But why does it look untouched? Finn didn't answer. He examined the lock and noticed a small keypad attached to the unit's door. Ryan stepped forward, studying the keypad. Richard was meticulous. He wouldn't use an obvious code. Finn handed her the ledger. Could the code be in here? Ryan flipped through the pages quickly, her eyes scanning the entries. After a moment, she stopped. Here, she said, pointing to a set of numbers listed beside one of the transactions, 1947. It's worth a shot, Finn said. Ryan entered the numbers into the keypad. There was a soft beep, followed by a click as the lock disengaged. Finn slid the door open, revealing a dimly lit space filled with neatly stacked crates and boxes. A single desk sat at the back of the unit, its surface covered in papers and a locked metal case. This is it, Ryan whispered, stepping inside. Finn followed, shining his flashlight over the crates. Many were labeled with cryptic names, but one caught his eye. Vault Access. Over here, he called, pointing to the crate. Ryan opened it, revealing a series of maps and documents. One map, in particular, was marked with a bold red X in the center. "What's this?" Finn asked, pulling the map out. Ryan examined it closely. This is where the vault is." Before they could celebrate their find, a loud crash echoed through the facility. Scout barked sharply, spinning toward the entrance. "Lily," Ryan hissed. Finn grabbed the map and stuffed it into his bag. "We need to move." They barely had time to react before Lily appeared in the doorway, a flashlight in one hand and a crowbar in the other. Well, Lily said, his voice dripping with mockery. "I knew you'd lead me to the good stuff." Finn stepped forward, blocking Ryan and Scout. "You're too late. There's nothing left for you." Lily smirked. "You think I'm here for leftovers? Hand over the map, and maybe I'll let you leave in one piece." Before Lily could move closer, Scout lunged forward, barking ferociously. Lily stumbled back, caught off guard, and dropped the crowbar with a loud clang. Finn took the opportunity to grab Ryan's arm. "Run." They bolted out of the unit, Scout following close behind. Lily's shouts echoed behind them, but they didn't look back. They reached the car just as Lily emerged from the shadows. Finn started the engine, slamming the car into gear as Ryan and Scout jumped inside. As they sped away, Finn glanced in the rearview mirror. Lily stood in the distance, his expression dark and furious. "This is getting out of hand," Finn muttered, gripping the wheel. Ryan looked at the map in her hands, her expression grim. "If this vault is what I think it is, it's only going to get worse." Scout barked softly, his tail wagging despite the tension. Finn sighed. "All right, boy, let's see where this takes us." The tension from the storage facility lingered as Finn drove down the dark road. The map, now creased from Ryan's grip, sat open on her lap. Scout lay in the back seat, his head resting on his paws, but his ears twitching with every sound. Ryan traced her finger over the red X on the map. "This location," she said, her voice tight, "isn't random. It's an old Hargrove property, a mine that was shut down decades ago." Finn raised an eyebrow. "A mine? What kind of treasure would he hide there?" "Not just treasure," Ryan replied. "Documents. Evidence. Richard didn't trust anyone, so he kept his most valuable secrets somewhere no one would think to look." Finn glanced at her. "And how exactly do you know all this?" Ryan hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. "Family stories," she said finally. "I heard a lot growing up." Finn didn't push further, but her vague answers left him uneasy. The drive to the mine was long and winding, taking them further into the wilderness. By the time they arrived, the first light of dawn was breaking over the horizon. The entrance to the mine was marked by a rusted gate and a faded sign that read Hargrove Mining Co. Beyond the gate, the ground sloped downward into darkness, the remains of old mining equipment scattered around the area. Finn parked the car and stepped out, taking a deep breath of the crisp morning air. Scout jumped out after him, his nose immediately to the ground. "This place gives me the creeps," Finn muttered, shining his flashlight toward the mine entrance. Ryan joined him, her eyes scanning the area. "If the vault is here, it's probably deep inside." Finn nodded. "Let's get to it." The mine was cold and damp, with narrow tunnels that seemed to twist endlessly. Finn led the way, flashlight in one hand and the map in the other. Ryan followed closely, holding a second flashlight, while Scout trotted ahead, his nails clicking softly against the stone floor. The walls were lined with rusted rails and broken wooden beams. Occasionally, they passed an old mining cart or discarded tools, remnants of a bygone era. "This map doesn't make much sense down here," Finn said, stopping to examine it. "Everything looks the same." Ryan pointed to a marking on the map. "There should be a fork in the tunnel ahead. The vault is marked near the left passage." Scout barked suddenly, his tail wagging as he darted toward the fork. Finn chuckled softly. "Guess we know which way to go." After another 15 minutes of walking, they reached a large steel door embedded into the rock. It was old but intact, with a heavy wheel lock in the center and faint engravings along the edges. "This has to be it," Ryan said, stepping forward. Finn examined the door. "How did we open it?" Ryan pulled out the key they had found at the mansion. "This should do it." She inserted the key into a small lock near the wheel. With a click, the mechanism engaged, and Finn began turning the wheel. It groaned in protest, the sound echoing through the tunnel, but eventually the door creaked open. Inside was a large room, dimly lit by a single overhead bulb that flickered as they entered. Shelves lined the walls, filled with crates, boxes, and ledgers. At the center of the room was a table covered in neatly arranged papers and a small safe. "This is it," Ryan whispered, her eyes scanning the room. "Richard's secrets." Finn opened one of the crates, finding stacks of documents detailing smuggling routes, coded messages, and lists of transactions. "This is enough to bring down an empire," he said. Ryan approached the safe, her hands trembling slightly as she worked to open it. When the door swung open, she gasped. Inside was a leather-bound journal, its cover embossed with the initials RH. "What is it?" Finn asked. Ryan opened the journal, flipping through its pages. "This is Richard's personal ledger. It's everything, every deal, every bribe, every betrayal. This is the key to it all." Before they could celebrate their discovery, Scout barked loudly, his growls echoing through the vault. Finn spun around, his flashlight sweeping across the entrance. Standing there, his gun drawn, was Lily. "You just couldn't leave it alone, could you?" Lily said, his voice cold. Finn stepped in front of Ryan, shielding her. "You don't have to do this, Lily." "Oh, but I do," Lily replied. "That ledger is worth more than you can imagine. Hand it over, and maybe I won't leave you trapped down here." Ryan held the journal tightly, her knuckles white. "This isn't just about money. This is about exposing the truth." Lily sneered. "The truth doesn't matter. Power does." Before Lily could make a move, Scout lunged at him, barking furiously. Lily stumbled back, firing a shot that ricocheted off the wall. Finn took the opportunity to tackle Lily, knocking the gun from his hand. The two struggled on the ground, their grunts echoing in the confined space. Ryan grabbed the gun, pointing it at Lily. "Enough," she shouted. Lily froze, his chest heaving as he glared up at her. "Get out," Ryan said, her voice steady. "And if you come after us again, you won't get another warning." Lily scrambled to his feet, muttering curses under his breath as he backed toward the door. As Lily disappeared into the tunnel, the overhead bulb flickered violently. The ground rumbled beneath their feet, and a low groan echoed through the mine. "The tunnel's unstable," Finn said urgently. "We need to get out of here." They grabbed as many documents as they could carry before running back toward the entrance. The ground shook with increasing intensity, debris falling from the ceiling. Scout led the way, barking sharply to guide them through the darkness. "Almost there," Finn shouted, the faint light of the exit growing brighter. They burst out of the mine just as a deafening crash echoed behind them. Finn turned to see the entrance collapse, sealing the vault and its remaining contents inside. Back at the car, Finn leaned against the hood, catching his breath. Scout sat beside him, his tongue lolling out as he panted. Ryan held the journal tightly, her expression a mix of relief and determination. "This is enough," she said softly, "enough to expose everything." Finn nodded, "But it's not over yet. Lily's not going to give up that easily." Scout barked once, as if agreeing. Finn looked down at the dog and smiled. "Good work, boy. Let's finish this." The drive back from the mine was tense. Ryan sat in the passenger seat, gripping the leather-bound journal tightly, her knuckles white. Scout lay in the back seat, his head resting on Finn's bag, his tail flicking occasionally. Finn kept glancing at the rearview mirror. He knew Lily wasn't done, and the thought of him lurking somewhere on the road sent a chill down his spine. "We need to figure out our next move," Finn said, breaking the silence. Ryan nodded, her eyes fixed on the journal. "We have enough here to blow this whole thing wide open. But we also have to be careful. Lily won't stop until he gets his hands on this." Finn tightened his grip on the steering wheel. "Then we stay ahead of him. Let's figure out what's in that journal." Back at Finn's house, the three of them sat around the kitchen table. Ryan opened the journal, flipping carefully through the pages. The handwriting was meticulous, each entry detailing transactions, names, and coded messages. "This is unbelievable," Ryan murmured. "Richard kept everything. Every deal, every bribe, every name." Finn leaned closer. "Can you decode it?" Ryan pointed to a section near the back. "This looks like a cipher key. If we can match it to the coded sections, we'll have everything." Scout barked, his nose nudging one of the pages. Finn glanced down and saw a sketch of a symbol, an intricate design that looked familiar. "Wait," Finn said, grabbing his phone. He scrolled through the photos he'd taken at the storage facility and stopped at one. This symbol was on one of the crates. Ryan's eyes widened. That means some of the items Richard stored were tied to these deals. If we can connect the dots, we'll have proof. Before they could dive further into the journal, the sound of tires screeching outside made Finn freeze. He exchanged a glance with Ryan, who quickly shut the journal and tucked it into her bag. Scout growled, his body tense as he ran to the window. Finn followed, peeking out through the curtains. A black car was parked across the street, its engine idling. "Lily," Ryan said, her voice tight. Finn grabbed his keys. We can't stay here. Let's go. They piled into the car, Scout jumping into the back seat as Finn started the engine. As they pulled out of the driveway, the black car roared to life, following close behind. He's not letting up, Ryan said, glancing over her shoulder. Finn weaved through the streets, his hands steady on the wheel. The black car stayed on their tail, gaining ground with every turn. Scout barked sharply, as if urging Finn to move faster. "I'm trying, boy," Finn muttered, his jaw clenched. As they reached the edge of town, Finn spotted an old industrial park up ahead. "Hold on," he said, turning sharply into the park. The industrial park was a maze of abandoned buildings and overgrown lots. Finn sped through the narrow roads, weaving between obstacles. The black car followed, its headlights cutting through the darkness. "Do you even know where you're going?" Ryan asked, gripping the door handle. "Not a clue," Finn replied. Scout barked again, his tail wagging furiously. Finn glanced at the dog and noticed him looking toward a narrow alley between two buildings. "Trust the dog," Finn muttered, turning into the alley. The black car hesitated, its driver unsure of the tight space. Finn sped through, emerging on the other side just as Lily's car skidded to a stop. They didn't wait to see if he'd follow. Finn drove back onto the main road, putting as much distance between them and Lily as possible. Back on the highway, Ryan took a deep breath. "We can't keep running forever," she said. "We need to use what we have." Finn nodded. "We'll need to contact someone who can help, someone with the resources to take this down." Ryan hesitated. "I know someone, a journalist. He's been looking into Hargrove for years." Finn raised an eyebrow. "Can we trust him?" "Yes," Ryan said firmly. "If anyone can help us, it's him." They pulled over at a small diner, the parking lot empty except for a few trucks. Inside, the fluorescent lights buzzed faintly, casting a cold glow over the worn booths and sticky tables. Ryan pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Finn and Scout watched her intently as she spoke in hushed tones. "Mark," she said, her voice urgent. "It's Ryan? I have something big. Meet me at the old rail yard tomorrow night. Bring everything you've got." She hung up and looked at Finn. "He's in. But we have to be ready. Lily won't give up that easily." Back at the car, Finn leaned against the hood, staring out at the dark horizon. "This is it, isn't it? The endgame." Ryan nodded. "If we do this right, we can expose everything Richard tried to hide. But if we slip up," Finn didn't let her finish. "We won't. We have the truth on our side." Scout barked softly, his tail wagging. Finn smiled and ruffled the dog's ears. "You ready for this, Oi?" Scout barked again, his eyes sharp and focused. "Then let's finish what we started," Finn said, determination in his voice. The old rail yard was a relic of the past, filled with rusted train cars, abandoned tracks, and overgrown weeds. Finn parked the car a safe distance away, his eyes scanning the dimly lit area. The moonlight barely illuminated the scene, giving everything an eerie, desolate feel. Scout jumped out of the car first, his nose to the ground, sniffing intently. Ryan followed, holding the leather-bound journal tightly to her chest. "You trust this guy?" Finn asked, his voice low. "Mark's one of the best," Ryan replied. "He's been digging into Hargrove's operations for years. If anyone can help us, it's him." The sound of tires crunching gravel made them both turn. A beat-up sedan rolled into the rail yard, its headlights cutting through the darkness. The car came to a stop, and a man in his early 40s stepped out. He wore a rumpled jacket and carried a messenger bag slung over his shoulder. "Ryan," he said, his tone equal parts relief and concern. "You look like you've been through hell." "Nice to see you too, Mark," Ryan said, offering a weak smile. Mark's eyes shifted to Finn and then to Scout. "And this is?" "Mason," Ryan said quickly. "He's the one who found the ledger." Mark extended a hand. "You have no idea what kind of hornet's nest you've kicked, do you?" Finn shook his hand, smirking. "I'm starting to get the picture." They gathered around the hood of Mark's car, the journal, map, and documents spread out under the dim light of a flashlight. Mark flipped through the pages of the journal, his eyes widening with every entry. "This is gold," he muttered. "Names, dates, transactions. This could take down half the people in power right now." "That's the idea," Ryan said. Mark glanced at her. "You realize this puts a target on your back. On all of us?" "We've already got one," Finn said, his tone grim. Mark nodded, his expression serious. "We'll need to move fast. I have contacts who can authenticate this, but we need to secure the originals somewhere safe." Just as they were wrapping up, Scout's growl cut through the night. His body stiffened, and his ears perked up as he stared into the shadows. Finn grabbed the flashlight, scanning the area. "What is it, boy?" The sound of footsteps echoed through the rail yard. From behind one of the train cars, Lily stepped into view, a gun in hand and a smug grin on his face. "Well, isn't this cozy?" Lily said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. Finn stepped in front of Ryan and Mark, his jaw tightening. "How did you find us?" Lily shrugged. "You're not as hard to track as you think. Now hand over the journal." Ryan's grip on the journal tightened. "Over my dead body." Lily smirked. "If that's what it takes." Before anyone could react, Lily raised his gun. Scout lunged at him with a ferocious bark, knocking him off balance. The gun went off, the shot ringing out into the night. Finn rushed forward, tackling Lily to the ground. The two men struggled, their grunts echoing through the rail yard. "Get the journal out of here," Finn shouted over his shoulder. Ryan hesitated for a split second before grabbing the journal and running toward Mark's car. Mark followed, fumbling with his keys. Lily shoved Finn off him and scrambled to his feet. Before he could chase after Ryan, Scout darted in, biting at his leg. Lily yelped in pain, kicking at the dog, but Scout held his ground. Finn grabbed a nearby metal pipe, swinging it toward Lily. The pipe struck his arm, sending the gun flying into the dirt. Lily cursed loudly, clutching his arm as he backed away. Ryan and Mark managed to get into the car, the engine roaring to life. "Get going," Finn shouted, waving them off. Mark hit the gas, the car speeding out of the rail yard with the journal safely inside. Seeing the car disappear into the night, Lily glared at Finn, his expression furious. "This isn't over, Evans." Finn stood his ground, the pipe still in his hands. "You're right. It's not." Lily spat on the ground before turning and running into the shadows. Finn exhaled deeply, dropping the pipe. Scout trotted over, panting but unharmed. "Good work, boy," Finn said, kneeling to scratch behind Scout's ears. Finn and Scout left the rail yard, heading back to a safe house Ryan had arranged earlier. By the time they arrived, the adrenaline had worn off, replaced by exhaustion. Ryan was pacing the room when they walked in, her face a mix of relief and worry. "What happened?" "Lily got away," Finn said, sinking into a chair. "But the journal's safe. That's what matters." Mark looked up from his laptop. "I've already sent copies of the key pages to my contacts. They'll start investigating immediately." Finn nodded. "Good. Let's make sure this was worth it." As the group planned their next steps, Scout lay by Finn's feet, his eyes half closed, but his ears still twitching at every sound. Finn looked down at the dog and smiled. "We've come a long way, haven't we?" Scout wagged his tail, as if to say, "We're not done yet." Ryan stepped forward, placing a hand on Finn's shoulder. "Thank you," she said softly. Finn met her gaze. "Let's finish this." The morning sun cast a pale light over the safe house as Finn, Ryan, and Mark sat around a makeshift workspace. The journal, along with the scanned copies Mark had sent to his contacts, lay spread across the table. Scout rested nearby, his sharp eyes flicking between the group as if he understood the gravity of the moment. Mark looked up from his laptop, his face grim. "We've got a problem." Finn leaned forward. "What kind of problem?" "The people I sent this to are nervous," Mark said. "This isn't just a scandal. These documents implicate powerful individuals, politicians, CEOs, even law enforcement. If we're not careful, this could backfire." Ryan frowned. "What are you saying? That we just sit on this?" Mark shook his head. "I'm saying we need to be smart. We can't just dump this online and hope for the best. We need a coordinated release, something that ensures it can't be silenced." Finn nodded slowly. "So what's the plan?" Mark laid out his strategy. "We need multiple outlets, journalists, whistleblower platforms, even social media. The goal is to flood the system so it can't be contained." Ryan tapped her finger on the journal. "And we need to focus on the most damning parts first. The names, the transactions, the evidence that ties it all together." Finn glanced at Scout, who wagged his tail. "We got everything we need right here," he said. "Let's make it count." Just as they began organizing the release, the sound of tires screeching outside made everyone freeze. Scout was on his feet instantly, growling low as he stared at the door. "Lily," Finn muttered, grabbing the metal pipe he had brought back from the rail yard. The door burst open and Lily stormed in, flanked by two other men. "You didn't think I'd let you walk away with that journal, did you?" Lily sneered, his gun aimed directly at Finn. Ryan stepped in front of the table, her hand resting protectively on the journal. "You're too late, Lily. The truth is already out." Lily smirked. "We'll see about that." Lily's men moved toward the group, but Scout lunged first, his sharp barks echoing through the room. One man stumbled back, startled, while Finn swung the pipe at the other, knocking him off balance. Chaos erupted as the room turned into a battleground. Ryan grabbed the journal and moved toward the back door while Mark frantically typed on his laptop, uploading the files to multiple platforms. "Keep going," Finn shouted, blocking Lily's path with the pipe. Lily fired a shot that grazed Finn's arm, but he didn't stop. Scout barked and leaped at Lily, clamping his jaws onto his arm and forcing him to drop the gun. Ryan and Mark reached the back door, Scout following closely. Finn stayed behind, using the pipe to hold off Lily and his remaining man. "Get out of here," Finn yelled. Ryan hesitated for a moment, her eyes meeting Finn's. Then she nodded and disappeared through the door with Mark and Scout. Once outside, Ryan led the group to Mark's car. The engine roared to life as they sped away, leaving the chaos of the safe house behind. Finn, battered but determined, managed to slip out through a side window, blending into the shadows as Lily cursed loudly behind him. By the time the group reconvened at a secure location, Mark's phone was buzzing nonstop. News outlets were already picking up the story, and social media was flooded with posts about the Hargrove ledger. "It's out," Mark said, his voice shaky with relief. "It's everywhere." Ryan sank into a chair, the weight of the moment hitting her. "We did it." Finn, his arm hastily bandaged, leaned against the wall. "Lily's not going to let this slide. He's going to come after us." Mark nodded. "Maybe, but with this much attention, he'll have to be careful. He can't afford to draw more heat." Scout padded over to Finn, wagging his tail and looking up at him with bright, proud eyes. "You were incredible, boy," Finn said, scratching behind Scout's ears. "I don't know how we would have done this without you." Scout barked once, his tail thumping against the floor. Underscore 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 underscore. Looking ahead. As the group watched the story spread across news channels and social media, Finn felt a sense of relief mixed with unease. "This isn't the end," he said quietly, "but it's a start." Ryan looked at him, her expression resolute. "We'll be ready for whatever comes next." Finn glanced at Scout, who had settled at his feet, his head resting on his paws. "Yeah," he said softly, "we will." The hours after the journal's release felt like a quiet before a storm. The adrenaline of the night before had faded, leaving behind a strange, uneasy stillness. Finn sat in the dimly lit room, his eyes glued to the news. Headlines screamed about the corruption linked to the Hargrove family, and the story was trending on social media. The world was finally hearing the truth, but Finn couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to get worse before they got better. Scout lay at his feet, content for the moment, but his sharp eyes never left the door, always alert. Ryan sat beside him, her phone in hand. She had been fielding calls all night, some from journalists, others from contacts who had seen the news. "I think we did it," Ryan said quietly, breaking the silence. "We've taken down Monster." Finn glanced at her, his gaze sharp. "You know it's not over, right?" She nodded, the weight of his words settling over her. "I know, but for the first time in a long time, it feels like we got the upper hand." Later that afternoon, the quiet was shattered by a phone call. Mark, who had been pacing nervously, picked up his phone, his face draining a color as he listened. "Lily's not done," Mark said, his voice strained. "He's gathering people with influence, connections. He won't stop until he gets the journal back." Finn stood, his jaw tight. "How long until he makes his move?" "Could be soon," Mark replied. "We need to stay one step ahead." Ryan stood up, her eyes narrowed with determination. "We can't let him win. We need to push forward." Finn rubbed his forehead, his mind racing. The truth was out there now. It was all over the news. But with Lily and his allies out there, they couldn't rest. Not yet. They gathered around the table once again, the remnants of the journal and the documents spread out before them. Finn felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. He had started this journey to uncover the truth, but now it felt like there was so much more to lose. "We need to contact the authorities," Mark said, his fingers tapping nervously on the table. "The more people we can get involved, the better. But we also need to protect ourselves. Lily's going to try and come after us." Finn nodded. "We can't let him silence us. If we got enough evidence to take down his network, then we push forward." Ryan glanced at the map, her finger tracing the route Lily had taken. "There's a lot more here." Richard's empire wasn't just about smuggling, it was about controlling everything. The businesses, the people, the land. Finn thought about all the names they had uncovered, the connections, the people who had been complicit in the system. We need to break it wide open, he said. As the night wore on, the sense of urgency grew. They had to act quickly, before Lily or anyone else could get to them first. We got one shot at this, Ryan said, her voice low but firm. We push everything out, names, locations, the full scale of the operation. If we hold back, they'll just keep coming for us. Mark stared at the documents, his face pale. You're asking me to risk everything. If we do this, there's no turning back. We don't have a choice, Finn replied, his voice resolute. If we sit on this, we're just letting them get away with it. We've come this far, we finish it. Scout barked, his eyes flashing in the dim light. Finn smiled down at him. I guess you're ready too, huh? Ryan chuckled softly. He's our best shot. It was decided. The files, the connections, everything would be handed over to trusted journalists, police contacts, and anyone willing to help bring the truth to light. Mark worked furiously on his laptop, compiling everything they had gathered. Ryan, standing by his side, made the final adjustments, ensuring that every document was linked to the right person, every deal exposed. We can't miss anything, Ryan said, her eyes scanning the screen one last time. We won't, Mark replied, his fingers flying across the keys. Finn watched them work, his thoughts on the road ahead. They were close to finishing what they had started, but the danger wasn't over yet. Lily would be out there, and there would be others willing to fight to keep the truth buried. But Finn had a feeling, one that had only grown stronger since meeting Scout, that things were finally falling into place. They were going to expose everything. With everything prepared, they took a moment to breathe. Scout sat beside Finn, his head resting on his paws as if nothing in the world could disturb him. For a moment, it felt like the calm before a storm. The team had done everything they could, and now all they could do was wait. I don't know what will happen next, Ryan said, looking at Finn, but I know this is the right thing to do. Finn nodded. It is, and no matter what happens, we've made sure the truth is out there. Scout looked up at Finn, his gaze steady and determined. Finn smiled. We're in this together, buddy. The night air was thick with tension as Finn, Ryan, Mark, and Scout waited. The files were out, spread across multiple secure platforms, sent to journalists, and shared with law enforcement. The truth about Richard Hargrove's smuggling empire, about the bribes, the corrupt officials, and the innocent lives ruined, was finally in the open. But they knew it wasn't over. It had only just begun. Finn paced the small room, glancing at his watch. He couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, something big. Ryan sat at the table, staring at her phone, her fingers tapping impatiently. Mark was on his laptop, scrolling through messages from his contacts, trying to keep up with the news breaking around them. We did everything we could, Finn said, stopping by the window. Now we just wait. The first sign of trouble came less than an hour later. Mark's phone buzzed with an incoming message from a news outlet. He opened it quickly, his eyes scanning the text. It's happening, Mark said, his voice low. The story's gone viral. They're picking it up everywhere. Ryan's face lit up, finally. Finn leaned over to see the screen. They can't stop it now. But Mark's expression darkened. There's more. It's not just the good guys who are paying attention. Lily's people are mobilizing. They're trying to cover their tracks, and they'll come for us. They'll come for anyone with the evidence. Finn's jaw tightened. We knew this wouldn't be easy. Ryan stood up, her voice firm. It's already too late for them to stop it. We've exposed too much. We just have to hold on. Just as the group began to settle into the reality of their success, the phone rang. Ryan picked it up, her hand shaking as she answered. Ryan Hargrove, came a cold voice on the other end. Her eyes widened. Lily. Finn stood up immediately, the room suddenly feeling too small. You think you've won? Lily's voice was venomous. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. But you're not getting away with this. I'll make sure of that. Ryan's expression hardened. You're too late, Lily. The truth is out. There's no going back. You have no idea what you're dealing with, Lily spat. You've uncovered enough to ruin a lot of lives. But if you think you're safe, you're wrong. I'll find you, and I'll make you regret this. Ryan's hand tightened around the phone. You don't scare me. Lily chuckled darkly. We'll see about that. Then the line went dead. As the phone call ended, the room fell into a heady silence. Finn could feel the tension mounting in the air. They had known this moment would come, but the reality of it was still jarring. He's coming for us, Finn said, pacing again. We have to get ready. We have no idea how far his reach is. Ryan nodded. But we've done what we needed to do. The world knows now. The question is whether we can survive this. Mark closed his laptop and stood up. We can't stay here. Lily will come looking for us. He has the resources to find us wherever we go. Finn looked down at Scout, who was lying on the floor, eyes alert. He's right. We need to keep moving. They packed quickly, gathering the most important documents, the journal, and any other evidence that could lead to Lily's downfall. But the question remained, where would they go? We can't just run forever, Ryan said. We need to stay ahead of him. We need to make our next move count. Finn looked at her, his mind racing. What if we use the press? If we release everything to them, he won't be able to silence us. Mark looked at him. You're right, but we need to be careful. Lily's network is deep, and if we give him the chance, he could turn the story against us. We'll take our chances, Finn said, his voice determined. We have to push forward. We can't let him win. Ryan and Mark exchanged a glance, then nodded. Agreed, Ryan said. We do it tonight. We go public again, and we expose him completely. They spent the next few hours preparing, coordinating with trusted journalists who could verify and distribute the remaining documents. They set up secure lines of communication to make sure nothing was intercepted. But as the time passed, Finn couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Lily was close. He could feel it in the air. By midnight, the plan was in place. Finn, Ryan, and Mark were ready. They made their way to the safe house's exit, Scout leading the way as always. But as they stepped outside, Finn froze. A car was parked across the street, its headlights off. In the shadows, a figure stood, watching them. Lily, Finn muttered under his breath. Without warning, the figure moved. It wasn't Lily, but it was someone equally dangerous. A tall man with a mask, dressed in all black, stepped forward, a gun in his hand. Not so fast, the man said coldly, aiming the gun directly at Finn. Finn raised his hands, staying still. What do you want? The man didn't answer. Instead, he motioned for them to move. Get in the car, the masked man ordered. Ryan's eyes narrowed. We're not going anywhere with you. The man's hand tightened around the gun. You don't have a choice. Finn moved slowly, assessing the situation. He glanced at Ryan, who was ready to make a move. Mark stood by, his body tense, eyes scanning the area for any escape. Without warning, Scout lunged forward, barking furiously, and knocked the masked man off balance. Get down, Finn yelled. The group scrambled, diving for cover as the man fired a shot that ricocheted off the nearby wall. The chase was on. Finn, Ryan, Mark, and Scout ran toward the alley behind the safe house, trying to put distance between them and the gunman. They couldn't let this slip away. They had to finish what they started. Scout was ahead, his body low, leading the way as Finn kept up with him. The night was alive with tension, and Finn could feel the weight of their fight pressing down on them. We have to end this, he said, his breath coming in short gasps. We can't let them stop us now. Ryan nodded, determination etched on her face. We're almost there. We finish this tonight. Finn looked at Scout. The dog barked and wagged his tail, as if saying, we're not done yet. And they weren't. The adrenaline from the chase still pulsed through Finn's veins as he, Ryan, Mark, and Scout scrambled through the dark streets, their footsteps echoing in the quiet night. They moved with purpose, knowing that Lily's men were close, hunting them down with no intention of stopping. Finn led the way, his mind racing. They had one last chance to finish what they started. But he knew the risks. Every move had to be precise, every decision counted. Where are we going? Mark asked, keeping pace. Finn glanced at him. We head to the old town hall. It's off the radar, but it's the one place we can guarantee will be safe long enough to finish the job. It's connected to everything. Hargrove's empire, his operations, his ties to the city. Ryan looked over at Finn, her brow furrowed. You sure it's safe? Finn nodded. It's the only place we have left. Once we get there, we expose everything. Lily won't be able to control the narrative anymore. They arrived at the town hall, the old building towering above them like a relic from a forgotten era. The exterior was weathered, the stone walls chipped and faded, but inside, it still held the weight of history. It had seen its fair share of dark dealings and shady transactions, but tonight it would bear witness to the truth. Are you sure this is it? Mark asked, looking around warily. Finn didn't answer at first. He walked up to the front doors, hesitating only for a moment before pushing them open. The creak of the hinges broke the silence, and they stepped inside. The building was empty, save for a few scattered files and old furniture. It was clear no one had used it for years, but Finn knew exactly where to go. They descended into the basement, a forgotten storage area filled with documents, old records, and everything that had been hidden over the years. Rhiannon followed closely behind, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "This place feels wrong." Finn didn't acknowledge her words. He moved with purpose, his flashlight cutting through the darkness as he led the way to a hidden room deep within the basement. He reached for a lever near the back wall, pulling it open to reveal a small, hidden safe. "This is it," Finn said, pulling the safe open and revealing the final pieces of evidence that would expose everything. As Finn pulled out the final stack of documents, a sound stopped him dead in his tracks, footsteps, echoing from the dark hallway. He quickly turned to face the noise, his heart pounding in his chest. A figure emerged from the shadows. It wasn't Lily. It wasn't one of his men. It was someone they hadn't expected. "Mark?" Ryan's voice cracked. Mark stepped into the light, his hands raised in mock surrender. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "But this is where it ends." Finn's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" Mark smirked. "You think you've won? That you've exposed everything? You played right into Lily's hands." Finn shook his head, the realization dawning on him. "You're working for him." Mark nodded, his expression cold. "I had no choice. Lily made me an offer I couldn't refuse. But it wasn't just about the journal or the money. It's about control. The Hargrove legacy is worth more than any of you could understand." Ryan took a step back. "You lied to us." Mark didn't flinch. "I didn't lie. I just didn't tell the whole truth." The tension in the room thickened as Mark took a step forward, his eyes narrowing. "I'm not here to fight. I'm just here to make sure nothing gets in the way of Lily's plan. The truth doesn't matter anymore." Finn clenched his fists, his mind racing. "You're wrong. The truth always matters." "Not in this world," Mark shot back. "You exposed the surface, but you didn't dig deep enough. You don't understand the power behind Hargrove's operations. It's bigger than you think." Finn took a step forward, his eyes locked on Mark's. "If you think Lily's going to win this, you're mistaken. This isn't about power. It's about people. It's about the truth." Mark's expression faltered for a brief moment before hardening again. "You don't get it, do you? There's no escaping this. No one's going to believe you. No one's going to stop Lily." "Then we'll make them believe," Finn said. Before Mark could react, Finn lunged forward, knocking the gun out of his hand. The two struggled, grappling with each other in a frenzy. Scout barked, leaping at Mark and biting at his arm, forcing him to stagger back. In that moment, Finn grabbed Mark by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You're done. You're going to help us expose this?"